From 12 News, this is Newsmakers.
Welcome to this special edition of Newsmakers, a debate between the candidates for Warwick Mayor. Hello, everybody. I'm Tim White.
And I'm Ted Nisi. This 30-minute commercial-free debate was supposed to take place in person, but out of an abundance of caution due to the pandemic, the candidates will be joining us today remotely.
And they are the incumbent mayor of Warwick, Joseph Solomon. He is on the right-hand side of your screen, and his independent challenger, Frank Picozzi, on the left. As you can see, they are joining us via Zoom into our 12 News studios. They will each be given an opportunity to make a one-minute closing statement.
Mr. Solomon has been mayor of Warwick since 2018. Prior to that, he served as a city councilman for 18 years. Mr. Picozzi is making his first run for mayor. He was previously chairman of the Warwick School Committee.
Now, the rules for the debate are the same as if we were in person. Candidates, you may take notes, but you cannot use your phone or communicate with anyone during the debate. We're looking for an open and honest discussion of the issues. If you're not answering the question or taking too long, Ted and I will jump in. Let's begin. We're going to start with the schools, gentlemen. It seems that the Warwick school system is in constant turmoil, from labor unrest to criticism over how the schools handled reopening under the pandemic. Residents are unhappy, and it's not just parents. Public schools, as you know, impact property values. As a matter of fact, one resident told me recently, people used to move to Warwick for the school system. Now it's a reason they move away. Warwick mayors have always said they don't control the school committee, so there's little they can do. Mr. Picozzi, we're going to start with you. You were a school committee chairman. Do you agree, or do you think a mayor should be doing more right now?
No, a mayor does need to be doing more. They need to partner with the school department. Pool resources, need to always know what's going on. The school system is probably the most important part of the city. They're totally autonomous, and I support that. But you have to work with them all year long. You have to meet regularly with the superintendent. I had a nice chat with the superintendent yesterday, and he was telling me some of the things that are going on. It's not always about funding, but the schools have been underfunded for many years now. We once were the best school system in Rhode Island. It's not like that. Parents have lost confidence in it, and it's something that needs to be worked on now.
And so,
as far as COVID, with their response to reopen, do I have more time? I'm sorry, I don't want to keep going.
No, you can keep going. Go ahead, Mr. Picozzi.
Okay, as far as the COVID reopening, our schools are in terrible shape, and I support what the school committee did with the air filtration systems, but I also feel that the governor needed to give a lot more guidance in some of the federal money she had to help out the cities and towns. It's a hardship on all of the cities and towns. We want to open, but we want it to be safe. The kids need to be in school. I'm not a big fan of remote learning. They're missing out on a lot. So I hope that situation can resolve itself. I know they're waiting on some equipment, and we're just going to have to stand by and see.
All right, Mr. Solomon, we're going to turn to you now. You heard Mr. Picozzi right there. He said at the top of his answer, the mayor should be doing more right now. I don't need to tell you, you are the mayor. So why haven't you done more, to Mr. Picozzi's point, to interact with the school committee and interact with the superintendent?
Well, who's to say I did not do more? Ted, let me first explain one thing. I'm in constant communication with our elected school committee members and our administrators, not to mention teachers and staff. And I've given my ideas to the extent that I can give my ideas. This is an elected school committee, as it was before Mr. Picozzi quit the school committee many years ago. It has always been elected and autonomous, and I agree with Mr. Picozzi. When it's autonomous, you are limited as to what you have to say. I supported the $40 million bond, which is currently fixing up for schools. I'm also going on the ballot as supporting a $50 million referendum. In addition, as mayor, in the last 2 years, I've given $6 million additional funds to the schools, prior to the administration of which other Picozzis did not. I continue to fund the schools. I believe in the children of our future. I think it's very, very important for our future, just like our elderly. These are the most susceptible, and this is the aspects of the community that really needs a lot of attention or deserves rewards for all the hard work they put in. So yes, I do agree that it's autonomous, and yes, I have participated. I just don't go out there and wave a flag or shine lights on it, but I've participated, and I've brought the parties together along with some of my council colleagues, where communication has never been better than it's been in the last 2 years.
Mr. Picozzi, I'm going to give you an opportunity to briefly respond here. He says the communication has never been better. Do you have a response to the mayor there?
Well, that'd be news to the superintendent, because he said he doesn't meet with the mayor, doesn't talk to him very often. And let me go back to what he said about me quitting the school committee. In my second term, I was 2 years through, we were in contract negotiations, we were in arbitration, we were in mediation. We were there 5 nights a week. My mother was terminally ill. I missed the last 6 weeks of her life because I was there every night. I was taking care of my father because he was very ill. I resigned from the school committee because we got court ordered to go in on weekends, and that's when I was taking care of my father. And this man stood at my father's wake and said, I did the right thing. You always family come first, and he admired me for it. So it's hard to know what the sincerity is and where it ends.
All right, and final question to you, Mr. Solomon, on this topic. He said he has talked to the superintendent. He doesn't meet with you. Tell me, when was the last time you met with the superintendent of schools in Warwick?
I spoke to the superintendent, I believe it was Friday of last week. We were speaking relative to issues that were occurring at that time, and I appreciated it. No, I'm sorry. It may have been the weekend, Saturday. He called me when I was home, and we spoke together about a current issue, of which I did not go out there and publicize because it's not necessary to publicize it. I look for results. I don't look for waving the flag. And relative to my responses relative to schools are, I do agree with an elected autonomous school committee. However, the only duty the city has is to pay that which the school committee and administration has presented to us. And I've got to say, in the last 2 years, I was able to give $6 million more with no tax increase to the schools of this city and the programs that support them, like the Mentors program and many other programs. The
All right,
parents
Mr.
that
Solomon,
volunteer to
we do need
assist
to
at
move
the end
on
of the
because
day.
we want to get through.
These are all influencing.
We want to get through a number of topics in this debate. Thank you. This is Ted Nesi. So I want to ask about the roads, because as we survey voters, what they care about, what they're worried about, that keeps coming up. And there's a photo in the current edition of the Warwick Beacon showing a city councilman filling in a couple of potholes himself. He says the city had over a year and did not get it done, even though the council passed a resolution to fill those potholes in. Mr. Solomon, as you know, that sort of thing drives people nuts. Why would your administration need more than a year to fill a couple potholes?
Well, I hate to say it, but either that councilman was disingenuous or mistaken. And I was out there last week with the engineers, independent engineers, that are assessing all our streets by need. Streets should not be done by anything else as to what needs it the most. That's where we're getting started. We have a program in place that's going to take care of that. That councilman knew that, and that's to take place next week, because we didn't want to do the patching. It was a waste to do the patching last week, and he knew that. But then again, I guess the photographer just appeared there by accident, snapping pictures and putting it on the front page of the paper. But it's not about advertising, which you're doing. It's about getting results. And that's what I do. I get results.
Mr. Mayor,
I don't go for the flamboyancy.
Before I bring in Mr. Picozzi, it's a fair point if you have a road plan, of course, but at the same time, if the pothole was there for more than a year, don't people have the right to be frustrated, even if there is some plan that plan would leave that long of a time until you get to fix the pothole?
Are you talking to me?
Yes, Mr. Solomon.
Yes. Well, first of all, again, I think that councilman, again, was mistaken. I know he was mistaken. And it has not been a year. It is a program that I've been talking about, and he happens to be a membership of that homeowners association, and I've spoken to the president of that homeowners association, visited his house, which had a nice square patch done in front of it, and it was done properly. That was done last year or a year before, unbeknownst to me. However, we are continuing with that program. It's a long-term program. I've got a $10 million road initiative program to do the entire city as dictated by need by engineers, arbitrary engineers.
All right, thank you, Mr. Solomon. I want to bring in Mr. Picozzi. Mr. Picozzi, as a challenger, obviously it's always easy to say that whatever people aren't happy with the incumbent, you'll do it differently and do it better. But can you provide any concrete plan or program or sense of how you would get things like road repairs done more quickly for voters who are frustrated like that, considering you'll have roughly the same resources Mr. Solomon does if you were to become mayor?
That's a very broad question. First of all, it wouldn't take me a year to fill a pothole. I don't know why you would need an engineer to put a temporary patch on it so people don't damage their cars driving through it. It's been a long time. He's been a couple of council meetings. That councilman actually has dissented a lot on what the mayor's agenda, and it was probably some kind of a punishment. It's things like that just need to be changed. I mean, if you go on my website, I have detailed plans. It's hard to go over it of improving schools, improving on funding capital improvements in schools. We have the business climate in the city is bad. I mean, we have empty storefronts everywhere, and the weeds growing out, and we don't even enforce the ordinances. The city puts up barriers to people trying to open businesses here. I've been talking to a couple who've been trying to open a simple business for 4 months now, since June. You have to get them in there and get them open and give them a fighting chance. Like I said, it's a broad question, and it's in a minute I'm not going to be able to answer it. And I know there are limitations. I'm going to look to save money by cutting a lot of the supervisor jobs that have been created that we don't need. I want to bring back some of the workers so we can actually make the city look better than it does, because it looks like a third world country right now.
A third world country. Mr. Solomon, briefly, I'll give you a brief chance to respond.
Yes, well, I didn't know we were going on to other areas, but to go on to other areas, my one-on-one business program up until COVID-19 was working wonderfully. I'd visit small businesses in the city, going to meet them, see what they do, what we can do as a city to help. I've streamlined the permitting process, the fire inspection process, where people who didn't want to locate in Warwick in the past are locating in Warwick today. So I'm bringing businesses in, I'm bringing jobs into the city. So where my opponent is getting his information from, I guess I'll have to look to his website to find out. But
thank you, Mr. Picozzi.
That is completely inaccurate.
Thank you, Mr. Solomon. Mr. Picozzi, your response to that?
One-on-one program wasn't his initiative. It was done by a previous administration. That's not bringing new businesses in. That's businesses that are already here. I've heard from people waiting 3 to 4 weeks for permits to put signs up. As I said, just one example, they were trying to open up a pet grooming salon, and they were required to get an architect's plan to put up petition walls. It would have cost 3 times as much for the architect plans. They were required to do a parking lot plan that was already there because there was an existing business next door. And then they were told they needed a landscape architect. They fought through it. They finally got approvals, and now they're doing the work. But they've lost 4 months of income.
All right, gentlemen, we're going to go to a rapid fire section now of the debate. We're going to bring both of you on the screen at the same time, and we're doing that because we want to have quick answers to these questions. Again, 1 or 2 word answers. You'll get a feel for it off the top here. And Mr. Picozzi, we'll start with you. Do you support or oppose term limits for mayor of Warwick?
I support them.
And how long?
I'd say 3 2-year terms. I don't want anyone in there for 4 years either, but I also support it for the city council the same.
Okay, Mr. Solomon, do you support or oppose term limits for mayor of Warwick?
I support term limits simply because it avoids the problem that accumulated over 20 years.
Okay, and how long how long should those terms be?
I believe they should be 2 4-year terms. and not to exceed the 2 4-year terms.
Okay, Mr. Solomon, we'll stick with you. Do you support or oppose legalized recreational marijuana?
Again, I leave that to the voters. That's an issue of a statewide.
How would you vote on it,
origin.
How would you vote on it, Mr. Solomon? Do you support or oppose legalized marijuana?
At this point in time, until we can have enforcement and regulation as to overindulgence, I'd say the verdict's out.
Okay, Mr. Picozzi, support or oppose legalized recreational marijuana?
I'm not a big fan of marijuana, but I support legalizing if that's what the people want.
Only 2 communities, Mr. Picozzi, Providence and Newport, have police body-worn cameras. Do you support the Warwick Police Department going to body-worn cameras?
I can't answer that yes or no in a quick answer. I would do it for the protection of our roads. We have a very professional police department. I'm sure the mayor agrees. There's never been any hint of wrongdoing. But
okay,
I mean,
but can you, yes or no on body-worn cameras?
Yeah.
Mr. Picozzi, yes or no on body-worn cameras is what I'm looking for.
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Solomon.
It's something that's being pursued by the Police Chiefs Association of Rhode Island, and I believe they're coming up with a statewide plan. And I think that will take place in each municipality.
Okay, but do you support?
Yes, we do have to find this department.
Mr. Mayor? Do you support or oppose them?
Do I support or oppose them?
Yes.
I always support openness. And I
Is
always
that a yes,
support openness.
Mr. Solomon? Is that a yes?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, and finally, last question, Mr. Solomon. If a parent refuses to let their child get immunized for the coronavirus when a vaccine comes out, should the child be refused access to the school?
Again, access or denial of access would be a school decision. It's not my decision. However, health care is very important to all of society and those we expose. So I think that if that is being required, it's to save lives, if not your own. But
Mr. Solomon, I don't want to litigate the healthcare system. I
So
want to
that
know
would be
how
a yes.
you. I want to know how you feel
That would
about
be a
it.
yes.
That would be a yes. Okay.
That would be a yes.
Mr. Picozzi, should a child be refused access to the school if their parent refuses to get them vaccinated for the coronavirus when a vaccine comes out?
Yes, if it's deemed a health risk, yes. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Ted?
All right, Mr. Picozzi, I'm going to start this round of questioning with you, and to some extent it goes back to what we talked about as we were discussing the roads. The latest edition of the Warwick Beacon carries a fairly scathing letter about Mr. Solomon's leadership from George Schuster, a longtime city resident, member of the zoning board. And he says he's voting for you because while you are less experienced, quote, what I am afraid of is more of the fear-mongering that's been the hallmark of the Solomon administration, along with an indecisiveness that has ground to a halt nearly every good idea that has come before the city. Mr. Picozzi, do you agree with that critique? And if so, can you point to examples of why?
I've read the letter. I haven't had a lot of time to, read it and absorb it. I do agree with a lot of what is said. We have had projects. I mean, just the abandoned school, our closed down schools. They haven't been marketed. They're still there. I know there was an offer a few years ago for the previous administration, the Aldridge School, for a charter school, and the current mayor opposed it. And I know he said in our last debate that it never reached the council floor, but that's because he wouldn't let it out on the council floor. It never went out for discussion.
So more broadly, that's a specific policy issue. But do you think there is a problem with the culture in City Hall under Mr. Solomon, or is it more just individual policies that you disagree with?
It's the culture. I mean, it's his way or the highway. He doesn't work well with the city council. He doesn't have a very open government. He keeps people at arm's length. I mean, I know he's out and about now, but pretty much he's not out amongst the people. He's not in touch with the constituents. I mean, this is a guy in a debate the other day. We're in COVID right now. People are losing, business is closing down. People are struggling financially. He's bragging about having 2 houses. He's just out of touch with his constituents. People are unhappy, and that's why I'm here, and that's why I have the support I have. This wasn't something I planned to do. people just want something different. And it's, we need to start moving forward, and we can't keep studying things and deciding and looking for the best thing, because it's just not working.
Mr. Solomon, you are ahead on time, so I'd ask you to be succinct. I'm sure you want to defend how you handle City Hall. What do you say to those critiques of kind of your approach to leadership in the mayor's office?
I guess it's apparent that my opponent has been around for quite a while, because had he been around the last 2 years, not the 20 years that his other family members have run the city, he would see that there is optimism, there is hope for the future. People are taking their jobs with enthusiasm. And relative to Mr. Schuster that he brought up, I don't know how it became part of this question. I think that was the initial part. He was a donor of mine up until we differed on doing our due diligence on sewers in the Tidewater area. I believe that those people should know what the cost is going to be. My opponent and Mr. Schuster both signed a petition for these sewers without knowing what the cost is going to be. Now, Mr. Schuster is quite successful. He has more than one home, but I guess because he supports Mr. Picozzi, he's a good guy. But he's not distanced from anyone. What I'm stating is that in the last 2 years, and that's why I go for term limitation, there is a new outlook on optimism. There's not a group that sits around and waits for a check on Friday in the corner of a city yard and told to hide until payday. Again, we've provided services through COVID-19 without skipping a beat, whether it be picking up garbage, whether it be picking up recycling, whether...
Okay, Mr. Solomon, as Ted said, you are ahead on time here, and you brought up a really important topic, so I want to jump on that. When we asked residents of Warwick what was important to them in this debate, sewers was top of the list, and the Bayside sewer expansion projects. Voters approved that some 28 years ago, but it still has not been delivered. Mr. Picozzi, I guess we'll start with you on this one. What is your plan for the sewer expansion project, or is it time to cut bait?
I've gotten two versions of how expensive that's going to be, the Bayside sewer project. I'm not looking over. I signed an online petition to move it forward. And if you read my comments in Beacon on that, it said that we need to have more public meetings and people need to have a voice. I've heard from both sides, people that desperately want them, people that don't want them because they're afraid they can't afford it. It's a situation that still has to be further looked into. Mr. Schuster, I never met the man. I have no idea. I know he's a member of the Fifth Ward Democratic Committee. I don't know why my opponent keeps bringing my brothers working for the DPW into this, because, I mean, for all the time he was the DPW director, the mayor was the council president. I know he has none of the burden of the responsibility of what's going on in the city, but he had the budget in his hands. He could have amended it any single way. He didn't. Schools didn't have to be level funded for years. The recreational facilities are disgusting in this city. They would just run down. He had the power to change all of that, and he didn't.
Okay, we've gotten a little bit off topic, Mr. Picozzi, and we are getting close to closing statements, if you can believe it or not. So I want Mr. Solomon to answer the question about the Bayside sewer expansion project real quick, in a minute or less. What is your plan for the sewer expansion project, or as I asked Mr. Picozzi, is it time to cut bait? Mr. Solomon.
It's not time to cut bait because our bay is very important to me. We need to do something about waste going into the bay. The most cost-effective way to the homeowners is what I'm desiring. Not everyone is a multi-millionaire that lives down there. There are people that live down there that have had their homes for generations. We want to make it continue to be affordable for them to keep their homes. When a 90-year-old man calls you crying that he's going to have to give up his house that he's had for generations, that gives me thought. My thought is to do what's best for the constituents, and that's what's important to everybody. Because without the constituents and the taxpayers and our residents, Warwick would not have the distinct characteristics of what it's known for.
Okay, Mr. Solomon, thank you. Gentlemen, a half-hour debate goes by very quickly, and each candidate now gets an opportunity for a 1-minute closing statement, the order of which was drawn prior to the debate. First up, Mr. Picozzi, your 60-second closing remarks.
I'm not even going to take 60 seconds. I mean, we've said it all. I'm here because people have asked me to do it. They want something better. When he says that everyone is happy, the citizens in the city are disgusted with what's going on, and the morale amongst the city employees is very, very low. I'm here. He talks about having the tools for the job, and I can go out and buy a scalpel, and you don't want me to do open surgery on your heart. The tools for this job are compassion and honest caring for the people. It's not about politics. It's not about keeping the power. It's not about everything that's going on, and I mean past and present. People just want to get this city back from the politicians, because it's been in their hands for many, many years. My greatest qualification is I'm not a politician. I own no one. When I get elected, I have no debts, political debts whatsoever. I still have personal debts, yes, but I'm poor. But I'm going to hire the best people and put them in positions that.
Thank you, Mr. Picozzi. Your time is up. Now, Mr. Solomon, your 60-second closing remarks.
Yes, I feel badly for Mr. Picozzi and his personal debts, especially the one recently put on for back taxes here in March. When COVID began, you got to lean for back taxes. But if you can't take care of your own personal finances, I ask, how can you take care of a $300 million budget city? And your brother was part of DPW, and he was also chief of staff for the mayor. And anyone who works in the city and got jobs in the city knew your brother. And a lot of your relatives and his friends and neighbors work for the city. However, it's not a matter of jobs, it's a matter of getting things done. I get more done for less. I'm getting the same services. I came to the city 40 years ago, a city I love. I married a woman who was born and educated in the city. I raised my son in the city. I've delivered new roads, new lights, additional funds for our seniors, additional funds for our schools and our younger generation, the mentor programs, help programs.
Okay, Mr. Solomon, your 1 minute is up. I want to thank both of you for joining us for this debate. I want to thank you both for joining us for this debate. The show ends when it ends, Mr. Mayor. So thank you again for agreeing to participate in this. And remember, Election Day is November 3rd. A very important deadline is coming up if you plan to vote by mail, and that is October 13th. You have to get your application in. I want to remind you, if you missed the debate, it's on WPRI.com. Don't forget about our podcast. For Ted Nesi, I'm Tim White. We'll see you next week on Newsmakers.